Well, yeah, my dad, when I was younger, was like the college minister at Orchard Hill. And for as long as I can remember, I'd go to Sunday school. And then as I got older, it started to become more of like a social gathering. I'd go for the donuts and for my friends and less about Jesus, pretty much. Then I went to Chaos and went to Big House and did all that. But throughout everything, it was like the thing that I'd like the most would be small group, because I could actually talk with people about, whatever problems would be going on or whatever. It wouldn't even have to be about God or about, Jesus or anything. It could just be about what's going on with school, what girls we were like talking to, what sports we were playing, stuff like that. But I always kind of just felt some sort of like pressure to live up to like my dad's standards, just with him being like a college minister and be well known. Then a few years ago, he kind of became one of like the head guys at Orchard Hill. So it was just
you
kind
could
of
say
like,
you're a pastor's kid.
yeah, and that was just like terrifying. So with that, I feel like a lot of pastors' kids, including myself, kind of rebelled, whether
Right.
it was on purpose or just
Right.
the nature of it. I didn't like authority always telling me what to do, including my parents.
I would say that's a slight understatement.
I got in trouble a lot,
Yes.
and mainly in junior high, less in high school,
Right.
but
But you were
never-
fun. You were a lot of fun.
Sure.
Just like to be the boss
Right,
of
exactly.
everything.
I wanted to control everything. I didn't like people telling me what to do.
Especially your parents.
Especially my parents.
Good job.
I was the same way. He's not that bad. I think a lot of kids are that way, but the pastor's kid gets
A bad rep.
Yeah, definitely.
So did you grow up in the church then?
I was raised in a Catholic church. It was really routine. We just went every Sunday, and that was only until maybe first or second grade, and then we just kind of quit going.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Can you both talk about maybe how you started to actually encounter Jesus and maybe like own your faith a little bit? I don't care who goes first.
Yeah, I can talk about that. Mine was from the beginning always kind of like a search for answers for myself, just to I don't know. So I was raised in the Catholic Church, but I was too young to really grasp anything or ask questions. But as I was growing up, in school, I was gifted. I did well on tests. I was like a smarty pants.
Also an understatement.
And I got to the point where, I was asking questions and trying to broaden my perspectives, and at that point I could start to see, why the church kids did it, why they would, because it made sense for them, and it was I get why it works for you, and I was never oh, I hate the church kids, but it was I'm not one of them. I can still hang out with you guys, and
Well, that's one thing I recognized about you right away. It was after practice one day, you and I just sat around, and you were always super respectful, but you would definitely have classified yourself as not believing in
that
God.
was junior year.
Yeah.
And that was, but at that point I had considered myself, agnostic, which is the word that everybody likes to use. Yeah, and it's one step more mild than atheism.
Right, because that scares people.
Well, yeah, and it made a lot more sense to me at the time, because it's I had just been asking all these existential questions. That's just kind of how my mind has always worked. I've really loved, let's ask the big questions type stuff.
And then that must have changed at some point.
It was almost fulfilled at some point. The answers started to come, which is, I don't think it's anything I can really explain that'll make perfect sense to anyone, but that's kind of what I've found is the point, is because it's all about making sense on your own personally, That's what I've found is how God works is with you, In junior high is when I started to really kind of solidify my beliefs in the fact that I didn't believe in God. And that was, at that age, I was really asking questions, and I had the internet now.
Right.
And so you get on the internet and you're like, what do people think about God? And you find all these different, it's oh, God is terrible. Oh, there's no scientific evidence that God can exist. This theory disproves this. And it's there's no reason that the scientific community should invoke that God is the answer to anything that we can prove, empirically. And it's oh, dang, I didn't know people were so adamant on, not accepting God as the answer, because the kind of
It couldn't be proven.
exactly the real answer was that we're just these humans that are the product of whatever forces are beyond our control, and it's all we're all just figuring it out. It's a great mystery, and I thought that mystery was super cool. But one of my good friends, who we got pretty close sophomore, junior, senior year. Mine will, because he's a year younger. And we ended up just talking one time, and I know that he's been a Christian his whole life, and I respected that. And we got to talking, and I was like, why do you, what's your evidence for this? I'm not trying to, bash you. It's just like, I want to know why you're so convinced in this. And he's like, dude, I can't explain it to you, which sounds like condescending, but it's just like when you look up in the sky and there's a beautiful sunset, you just feel it. You feel God talking to you. And I was like, that doesn't make sense. That right. You can't prove anything like that.
Right.
But what I really discredited at the time was that feeling that he was talking about. And so like you said, I've always been really into music. So one night during my senior year, I got off work and I was driving on the highway. It was late at night and there's no cars, and on 218 there's a curve that goes around George Wythe and you can go really fast. But I was just driving, and this point in the song kind of swelled up, and it felt like everything in my entire life just kind of lined up at that point. All these existential questions I was asking, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Why do I, want to be here? And it just I don't know, it was I knew I was meant to be right where I was at that moment. And all I felt was just this overwhelming sense of love. It was I love this. I love love. The fact that love is real. I knew it. That was all I knew at that moment, was just that I love this. Whatever it is, all of it. And
you even get kind of emotional talking.
Yeah, I did. Awesome. It was really cool, but I couldn't explain that.
Right. Well, and the outside story about that is you had tons of friends who had been praying for you, and I had been praying for you a lot. And right around that time, I really stepped on a limb. I was like, hey, you should come to Big House. I'm teaching. I know you don't believe in God, but I'm teaching tonight, and that'd be cool. And you said, that's weird because I just bought a Bible on Monday, and I was like,
yeah, it was the day before.
God. That's such a huge, and I think that's why it's important for us to talk about our stories, because God moves around in ways that we don't even know to get things to line up for him to reveal himself to us in a way that makes sense to us, because that was exactly how you needed him to come to you.
Exactly.
So, Lewis, tell us about your faith story a little bit. You always knew God, right. And honestly, you probably always knew right from wrong.
Right. Exactly. Just growing up in the church and understanding sort of what Jesus was about, I, knew that when I was doing wrong, that I was doing wrong, if that makes sense. I just wanted to be in control. I didn't want to have anyone tell me what I should do, whether it was my parents, whether it was authority, school, or whether it was God. I just wanted to do exactly what I wanted to do. I'd say a lot of that changed probably when I went on caravan my sophomore year. We went to New York, and Ruth had challenged us to, see God more every day. And I was like, okay, whatever that means, I don't know exactly what you're talking about.
And we're in New York City. So
right. And there were times throughout that week where, I was with Kaz Brown, and then Elliot was there, and we were talking with this one guy in Harlem or something crazy like that, and we were striking out. We were supposed to pray for people. Okay, we were supposed to go up to them and ask them to if we could pray for them. And I was a sophomore in high school. I was like, this is gonna be weird. This is gonna be awkward.
Right.
This is gonna be terrifying. Yeah, I'm just okay, we'll try it. We were striking out the whole day, and we ended up talking to this guy who just needed someone to pray for him, and he talked to us for an hour. And he was talking about how he'd just gotten out of the hospital but couldn't afford to pay his bills, and was addicted to certain painkillers and everything like that. And it just kind of hit me there that I was this is God talking to us right here. We need to pray for him. And that was really super impactful for me. So that was one of my first moments where I seen God. And then later on that trip, we like took the subway down to Times Square to go all get like a group picture taken or whatever. And I was just like acting really squirrely, being the center of attention, like always.
Shocking, really.
Just like jumping around, not really caring about my surroundings, not really realizing, this is like New York City, people are probably getting off work or something and really annoyed. And I ended up talking with this one random guy who was just like, what do your shirts mean? And I like that opened up the door and we just talked about like the gospel. And he was telling me that he wasn't a believer, but like he could see, like he knew more like biblical facts probably than I did, and was telling me, he's like, oh yeah, well here's this story, like how does that translate to like your life today, how does that make you a Christian? And it like made me stop and think, and I just like don't remember what I said, but I do remember that like it made sense. And like I talked with Ruth after because she was right there, and like that was one of those moments where I felt like God just like spoke for me. Like I was just kind of, I gave it up to him and he just spoke for me. So like that whole week and that trip was just like super monumental in me finally realizing like what God can do and like what God can be.
And being real.
Right. And then, I mean, granted, like then I still went through high school and I still like found myself getting into like pretty crappy situations with like partying and with girls and just like still living for myself. But like I'd say that was the start of me like being able to feel guilty about some of that and start to like feel the weight of my own sin. But I mean, still nothing really changed until I went to college and got plugged in with like Salt Company and had like older people telling me, keeping me accountable and like telling me when I was messing up, and like it helped that I would be super vulnerable and like kind of open about it. I think that's a big key. You can't just like hide and say you don't do things. But I had people just like telling me, like give me good advice and basically just like living with me, which was great. But then like later on in my freshman year, I was like in a relationship and came back for Valentine's Day or something, and she ended up having a party at our house, and then I ended up getting like too drunk and got embarrassed by something, ended up getting like aggressive with her and just totally like bashed everything that I stood for. And it was just kind of ironic because around the same time, one of my friends in Iowa City and like leaders was challenging me to like pray to see more of God once again. And I was feeling like I was being content because everything was going well in school, everything was going well, I was loving life, but I didn't have a need for Jesus. So I just prayed around that time to like for some sort of adversity, like for some sort of thing that I needed to like fall back on him for.
Be careful what you pray for.
Right. And it came through that week.
Yeah, that's
like
crazy.
It was like 2 days later, and like at the time when it happened, I was super devastated and I was embarrassed and I was mad at myself for like why that could happen. And then like the next day I realized like that was exactly what I had prayed for. Like I needed some reason to like lower my pride and look up to God and realize that like I can't do this on myself.
That's incredible. So God like started to reveal himself to you, and it took years.
Yes,
That's
long time.
incredible.
And that's what's crazy too, is when things are going great and you aren't thinking about God. You're thinking about, oh, I did this to make it for myself. I'm capable
Right.
of this, and
Right.
I don't need it.
Right.
So
Which
neither
is
of you were exactly
the biggest
looking,
lie.
but God came to you in a way you could hear.
Yep.
So you talked about love. How did you get from love to Jesus?
We have these accounts, from a long time ago, but in the big picture, it's really not that long ago. And apparently, some guy showed up in the out of nowhere, and he's just like, hey, like, what's up? I'm literally from this utopian society. I'm from heaven, and like, trust me, everything is perfect there. There's there's no problems, and you are just loved exactly the way you are. It's perfect. Everyone loves each other, and just follow me, and I'll show you how to get there. And people are like, this guy's like nuts. He's like basically the biggest hippie ever, because he's like, oh, just like love everybody. That's all you have to do is just like love your neighbor, love everybody.
And even bigger than that I am love. That's what he kept saying.
Exactly.
I am that. You can only do that through me.
Exactly. And he's like, that's the whole point.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
whole point is love.
Yeah.
Everything points to that.
Yeah.
And so people started following him, and some people were like, this is so crazy that we have to like write about it, because it's like, this big political event, because there's a lot of people who are saying like, no, this is not cool,
Right.
and then they kill him. And he's like, you know, like the whole account is that he's hanging there and he goes, I still love you. You know, it's everything still points to love, even though humans are capable of this. And I was like, that,
That finally made sense.
exactly.
It is crazy to me how much you guys both talk about God coming to you in such a unique way, but because I know you, I know it's ways that you, like, God was exactly who you needed him to be. Still completely him, but exactly how he came to you, how you could hear. So 2 questions next. And they're simple questions. How do you, like, abide in God? How do you know God now? And what gets in the way of that?
Okay. Abiding in God now for me is like probably a mixture of, you know, community and alone time, if that makes sense. I think that something that's very important for me is like I can feel myself like drifting away from God when I try to do too much on my own and I try to like isolate myself too much, but then also at the same time I can feel myself drifting away from God when I pour myself into a community that's not working for God. You know, like I still have a very strong friend group back here in Cedar Falls, but I wouldn't say that this friend group I have like motivates me to be a better Christian. So that's like hard for me to, you know, balance that.
It's super hard to balance because you still love those people.
Love them, but you know, I also realize that when I love them, it's hard for me to be a light, like to be God's light for them.
And maybe not get sucked into things that have been hard in the
Right, and it's just because temptations are there.
Yeah.
Now more than ever. It's like people think that once you're a Christian that it's going to get easier, but it actually gets harder.
It's like it's admitting that you're not strong enough to
Right.
do that because you like I will, you will, we will fall victim to it. You know.
Yeah. So here's my question. What would you say to high school students that either you wish you knew or knowing now has really impacted you? Is there any like bit of advice, for lack of a non-cheesy way to say it, that you would leave these guys with?
I mean, I have a couple things. The first one that I had said was, I mean, I've kind of been like saying this the whole time, but you got to find a community of people who's going to like hold you accountable. Because
And if you knew Lewis, for him to see that is so insanely shocking.
Well, Ruth, that message came from Ruth.
Right.
Like she was the one that was like,
And I don't
you
think
need
you
to have
agreed
a
with it
plan.
for a while.
No, I was like, yeah, whatever. Like I'll find that. Luckily for me, like I had friends who were already at Iowa who were involved in SALT.
That's who Lewis was for me. He was like, I'll take you to SALT right when you get to Iowa.
So like you have to have like something like that. Also, another one would be just like fighting small like sin struggles. Like you can look at your life and get really discouraged if you look at like your big picture sin and you're just like, wow, I struggle with this and this and this and it's just huge. But if you can,
even worth it.
Right. But if
And
you can
there's
just
no way I'll defeat it.
Right. But if you can just challenge things day by day and like start to realize more, even if you realize if you realize after the fact that you sin, like that's still big. A lot of people don't realize after they sin that they sin. Immediate confession. You don't do it for anyone else but like yourself. God already knows. So you're just
And then the next step is just comprehending God's grace.
exactly.
You guys did incredible. I appreciate how much just you being you and knowing God, how he tells you about himself, how encouraging that has been for me. So,
Thank you, Nikki.
way to go.
Thank you.